Rude. Moleaf, we're reading Inkheart. Oh, Timek asked too. Yeah, we're reading Inkheart, guys, by Cornelia Funk. It's the first in like a trilogy. Okay, so chapter 18, the excerpt foreshadowing part, the little thing that comes before each chapter, is from Treasure Island. It says, I can hardly fucking read that name. Squire Trelawney, Dr. Livesey, and the rest of these gentlemen having asked me to write down the whole particulars about Treasure Island from the beginning to the end, keeping nothing back but the bearings of the island, I take up my pen in the year of grace, 17 blank, and go back to the time when my father kept the Admiral Benbow Inn, and the brown old seaman with the sober cut first took up his... I don't know, man. I absolutely fucking butchered that paragraph. I hope I don't read the rest of the book. This is fucking bad. Fuck. Okay. And so Meggie heard her father read aloud for the first time in 9 years in a drafty old church. Even many, many years later, the smell of burnt paper would come back to her as soon as she opened one of the books from which he had read that awful morning. It was chilly in Capricorn's church. Meggie was to remember that later, too. Although the sun must have been hot outside and high in the sky by the time Mo began to read. He simply sat down on the floor where he was, legs crossed, one book on his lap and the others beside him. Meggie quickly knelt down beside him before Basta could catch hold of her. Here, get up all these steps, all of you, Capricorn told his men, and take the women with you, Flatnose. Only Basta stays where he is. Eleanor resisted, but Flatnose merely seized a handful of her hair and hauled her along after him. Capricorn's men climbed the steps and sat at their master's feet. What is in my nose? I feel like I've got a fuzzy. Is it my hair? Capricorn's men climbed the steps and sat at their master's feet, Eleanor among them like a pigeon with ruffled feathers in the middle of a mob of marauding crows. The only person who looked equally out of place was the thin reader Darius, who was sitting at the very end of the row of black-clad men and kept fiddling with his glasses. Mo opened the book on his lap and began leafing through it, frowning, as if searching for the pages for the gold he was to read out of it for Capricorn. Cockerel, you will cut out the tongue of anyone who utters the slightest sound while Silvertongue is reading, said Capricorn, and Cockerel drew a knife from his belt and looked along the row of men as if already selecting his first victim. It was so deathly quiet inside the red church that Meggie thought she could hear Basta breathing behind her, but perhaps it was only the sound of her own fear. Judging by their faces, Capricorn's men seemed to be feeling far from happy. They were looking at Mo with expressions of apprehension mingled with dislike. Meggie understood that only too well. Perhaps to the book through which Mo was leafing through so undecidedly. Had Capricorn told them that such a thing might happen? Did he even know it? What if she herself vanished as Mo obviously feared, or Eleanor? Meggie, Mo whispered to her as if he had heard her thoughts. Am I getting bit, or am I imagining it? Dunno. Hold on to me tight any way you can. Meggie nodded and clutched his sweater as if that would be any use. Yes, I think I found the right place, said Mo into the silence. He cast a glance at Capricorn, looked at Eleanor, and cleared his throat and began to read. Everything disappeared. The red walls of the church, the faces of Capricorn's men, Capricorn himself sitting in his chair. There was nothing but Mo's voice and the pictures forming in their minds from the letters on the page, like the pattern of a carpet taking shape on a loom. If Meggie could have hated Capricorn any more, she would have done so now. It was his fault that Meggie had never once read aloud to her in all these years. To think of the magic he could have worked in her room with his voice, a voice that gave a different flavor to every word, made every sentence a melody. Even Cockerel had forgotten his knife and the tongues he was supposed to cut out and was listening with a faraway expression on his face. Flatnose was staring into space, enraptured as if a pirate ship with all the sails set were truly cruising in through one of the church windows. The other men were equally entranced. There was not a sound to be heard but Moe's voice bringing the letters and words on the page to life. Only one member of his audience seemed immune to the magic of it. Face expressionless, pale eyes fixed on Moe, Capricorn sat there waiting for the clink of coins amidst the harmony of the worlds. The words, for chests of damp wood heavy with gold and silver. Moe did not keep him waiting long. It happened as he was reading what Jim Hawkins, a boy not much older than Maggie when he embarked on his terrifying adventure, saw in the dark cave. I don't know what that means. George's and Lewis's? I don't know if it's Louise's or Lewis's. Doubloons and double guineas and what? I can't read this shit. Treasure Island's a hard book, guys. Double guineas and moiries and sequins. The pictures of all the kings of Europe for the last 100 years, oriental pieces stamped with what looked like wisps of string or bits of spider's web, round pieces and square pieces, and pieces bored through the middle as if to wear them around your neck. Nearly every variety of money in the world must, I think, have found a place in that collection. And for number, I am sure they were like autumn leaves, so that my back ached with stooping and my fingers with sorting them out. The maidservants were cleaning the last crumbs off the tables when coins suddenly came rolling over the bare wood. The women stumbled back, dropping their wiping cloths and pressing their hands to their mouths as the coins tumbled and leaped about their feet. Gold, silver, and copper coins jingled over the flagstone floor, clinking as they gathered in heaps under the benches. More and more and more of them. Some rolled as far as the steps. Capricorn's men came to life, bent to pick up the glittering little things bouncing off their boots, but then snatched back their hands. None of them dared touch the magic money, for what else could it be? Gold made of paper and printer's ink, and the sound of a human voice. When the shower of gold stopped, at the very moment Moe closed the book, Maggie saw there was a little sand among the gleaming, glittering money, and a few iridescent blue beetles scuttled away. The head of an emerald green lizard emerged from a heap of tiny coins. It stared around with fixed eyes, tongue flicking out of its sharp little mouth. Basta drew his knife at it as if he could skewer not just the lizard, but the cowardice that had seized them all. However, Maggie gave a warning cry, and the lizard darted away so fast that the tip of the blade struck the stones. Basta ran over to his knife, picked it up, and pointed it threateningly in Maggie's direction. Capricorn rose from his chair, his face still as cold and blank as if nothing worth getting excited about had happened, and clapped his ringed hands graciously. "Not bad for a start, Silvertongue," he said. "See that, Darius? That's what gold looks like, not the rusty, dented metal you've read out of books for me. But now you've heard how the thing is done, I hope you'll have learned from it, just in case I ever require your services again." Darius did not reply. His eyes were fixed on Moe with such admiration in them. I guess I'll get a drink while that fucking goes through. Oh, bye everyone. Bye Reminique. He said bye everyone. Oh, there was an eyelash in my eye stabbing it. It must have been when I was itching earlier. It worked its way to the corner finally. Are you done? You don't see nothing. Okay. Darius did not reply. His eyes were fixed on Moe with such admiration in them that it wouldn't have surprised Maggie had he flung himself at her father's feet. When Moe straightened up, Darius approached him hesitantly. Capricorn's men were still gazing at the gold as if they didn't know what to do next. "Why are you standing there for, gaping like a lot of sheep?" cried Capricorn. "Pick it up. Go on." That was wonderful, Darius whispered to Mo, while Capricorn's men cautiously pulling the coins into bags and boxes. His eyes were gleaming behind his glasses like the eyes of a child who had just been given a much-wanted present. I've read that book many times, he said in a voice that shook, but I never saw it all as vividly as I did today. And I didn't just see it, I smelled it, the salt and the tar and the musty odor of the whole accursed island. Treasure Island, heavens above, I was petrified. Eleanor appeared behind Darius, pushing him impatiently aside. Flatnose had obviously forgotten her for the moment. He'll be here any minute, that's what I kept thinking. Long John Silver will be here, lashing out at us with his crutch. Mo just nodded, but Maggie could see the relief on his face. Here, take it, he told Darius, handing him the book. I hope I never have to read out of it again. One shouldn't push one's luck. I have hiccups now, are you kidding me? You said his name not quite right every time, Maggie whispered. Mo tenderly stroked the bridge of her nose. Ah, so you noticed, he whispered back. Yes, I thought that might help. Hey, get away from me. Perhaps the savage old pirate won't feel we're calling to him then, I told myself, and I'll stay where he belongs. Why are you looking at me like that? Why do you think, said Eleanor, answering instead of Maggie. Why is she looking so admiringly at her father? Because no one has ever read aloud like that, even apart from the money. I saw it all, the sea and the island, as clear as if I could touch it. I don't expect it was any different for your daughter. Mo had to smile. He kicked aside a few of the coins on the floor in front of him. One of Capricorn's men picked them up surreptitiously pocketed them. As he did so, he looked at Mo as uneasily as if he feared a word from him might turn him into a frog or one of the beetles still crawling among the coins. They're afraid of you, Mo, whispered Maggie. She could see the trepidation even on Bosta's face, although he was doing his best to hide it by assuming a particularly bored expression. Only Capricorn seemed to be left cold by what had happened. Arms folded, he stood there watching his men pick up the last of the coins. How much longer is this going to take? He asked finally. Leave the small change where it is and sit down again. And you, Silvertongue, open the next book. The next book? Eleanor's voice almost cracked with indignation. What on earth's the idea of that? The gold your men are shoveling up there is enough to last you at least 2 lifetimes. We're going home now. She was about to turn around, but Flatnose, who had finally remembered he was meant to be guarding Eleanor, seized her arm roughly. Mo looked up at Capricorn. Bosta, smiling unpleasantly, laid his hand on Maggie's shoulder. Silvertongue, he said, You heard, there are still plenty of books here. Mo looked at Maggie for a long time before bending to pick up the book he had chosen first. Tales from the 1001 Nights. The book that goes on and on forever, he murmured, opening it. Did you know the Arabs say no one can read it right through to the end, Maggie? She shook her head as she sat down beside him on the cold flagstones. Bosta let her, but he planted himself right behind her. Maggie didn't know much about the 1001 Nights, except that it was really a book in many volumes. The copy that Darius had given Mo could only be a small selection, where Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves in it and Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp. Which story would Mo read? Maggie thought she saw contradictory feelings on the faces of Capricorn's men. Fear of what Mo might bring to life, and all at the same time, a wish, a yearning almost, to once more be carried away by his voice, transported far away to a place where they could forget everything, even themselves. There was no smell of salt and rum when Mo began reading this time. The air in Capricorn's church grew hot. Maggie's eyes began to burn, and when she rubbed them, she found sand sticking to her knuckles. Once again, Capricorn's men listened to Mo's voice with bated breath, as if they... These fucking white things floating around, man. I'm like fucking inhaling them and shit. Ugh. Capricorn alone seemed to feel nothing as if of the magic, but his eyes showed that even he was spellbound. They were fixed on Mo's face, as unmoving as the eyes of a snake. His red suit made his pupils look even more washed out, and his body seemed tense, like a dog scenting its prey. But this time Mo disappointed him. The words offered up no riches, none of the treasure chest, pearls, and swords set with precious stones that Mo's voice conjured up, shining and sparkling, until Capricorn's men felt as if they could pluck them from the air. Something else slipped out of the pages, though, something breathing, a creature made of flesh and blood. A boy was suddenly standing between the still smoldering fires where Capricorn had burned the books. Meggie was the only one to notice him. All the others were too absorbed in the story. Even Mo didn't see him, far away as he was, somewhere in the sand and the wind as his eyes made their way through the labyrinth of letters. The boy was some 3 or 4 years older than Meggie. The turban around his head was dirty, his eyes dark with fear in his brown face. He blinked and rubbed them as if he could wipe it all away. The wrong picture, the wrong place. He looked around the church as if he had never seen a building before, and how could he have? So whenever I was a young child, really, I was like 14, I guess, whenever I first read this book. I think I was like 13 or 14 whenever I first read it. And I had a crush on Finoglio, the fucking, the character. Or no, not Finoglio, Farid. Finoglio's a different guy. That's a whole different character. But yeah, I had such a crush on this kid. I don't know, it was funny. Y'all can get crushes on book characters, you know that? I had crushes on a lot of book characters. The guy in the Maximum Ride novels, Vladimir Todd. Just a few. He looked around the church as if he had never seen a building before, and how could he have? There wouldn't be any churches with spires in his story, or green hills like those he would see outside. The robe he wore went down to his brown feet, and in the dim light of the church, it shone blue as the patch of the sky. Meggie wondered, what will happen when they see him? He's certainly not what Capricorn was hoping for, but Capricorn had already noticed the boy. Stop, he commanded, so sharply that Mo broke off in mid-sentence and raised his head. Abruptly, and rather unwillingly, Capricorn's men returned to reality. Cockrell was the first on his feet. Hey, where did he come from? He growled. The boy ducked, looked around with a terrified expression, and ran for it, doubling back and forth like a rabbit. But he didn't get far. 3 men immediately sprang forward and caught him at the feet of Capricorn's statue. Mo put the book down on the flagstones behind him and buried his face in his hands. Hey, Fulvio's gone, cried one of Capricorn's men. Vanished into thin air. They all stared at Mo. There it was again, the nervousness in their faces, but this time mingled not with admiration, but with anger. Get rid of that boy, Silvertongue, ordered Capricorn angrily. I've had more than enough of his kind, and bring Fulvio. I have more than enough of his kind. Bring back Fulvio. Mo took his hands away from his face and stood up. For the millionth time, I can't bring anyone back, he said. The fact that you don't believe me doesn't make that a lie. I can't do it. I can't decide who or what comes out of a book, nor who goes into it. Fuck, there's things floating around. Maybe it's a bad idea to come outside today. Shit. I need to reposition, I think. Okay, y'all still with me here? I don't know which fucking arm to have exposed. It matters. That's what's been bothering me. It's a big ass hair floating around. Maybe not. Maybe it's a bunch of stuff. There's just everything out here. Where did my page go? Shit. Okay, damn. Okay, we're back. We back. Fucking damn it. Meggie reached for Mo's hand. Some of Capricorn's men came closer, 2 of them holding the boy. They were pulling on his arms as if to tear him in half. Eyes wide with terror, the boys stared into their unfamiliar faces. Back to your places, Capricorn ordered to the angry men. A couple of them were already dangerously close to Mo. Why all this fuss? Have you forgotten how stupidly Fulvio acted on his last job? We almost had the police down on us. So it's the right man to have gone, and who knows, perhaps this lad will turn out to have talent for arson. All the same, I want to see pearls now. And gold and jewels. After all, they're what this story is all about, so let's have some. An uneasy murmuring rose among the men. Nonetheless, most of them returned to the steps and perched once more on the worn treads. Only 3 still stood in front of Mo, staring at him with intense hostility. One of them was Basta. Very well, so we can dispense with Fulvio, he said, never taking his eyes off Mo. But who is this wretched wizard going to magic into thin air next time? I don't want to end up in some thrice accursed desert story and find myself going around in a turban all of a sudden. The men standing near him nodded in agreement and looked at Mo so darkly that Maggie almost stopped breathing. Basta, I won't tell you again, Capricorn's voice sounded menacingly calm. Let him go on reading, all of you. And anyone whose teeth start chattering with fear had better go outside and help the women with the laundry. Some of the men looked longingly at the church, even with the two who had been standing outside, turned without a word and sat down with the others. You'll pay for Fulvio yet, Basta whispered to Mo before he restationed himself behind Maggie again. Why couldn't he have disappeared, she thought. The boy still hadn't uttered a sound. Lock him up. We'll see if he can be of any use to us later, ordered Capricorn. The boy did not resist as Flatnose led him away. Apparently numb, he stumbled along as if he were still expecting to wake up, when he realized this dream was never going to end. When the door closed behind the two of them, Capricorn returned to his chair. Go on reading, Silvertongue, he said, but we still have a long day ahead of us. But Mo looked at the books lying at his feet and shook his head. No, he said, you saw. It happened again. I'm tired. Be content with what I've brought you from Treasure Island. Those coins are worth a fortune. I want to go home, and I never want to set eyes on you again. His voice sounded rather rougher than usual, as if it had read too many words aloud. Capricorn looked at Mo appraisingly before turning his eyes to the bags and chests his men had filled with coins. He seemed to be working out how long their contents would keep him in comfort. Yes, you're right, he said at last. We'll go on tomorrow. Otherwise we might find a stinking camel turning up here next, or another half-starved boy. Tomorrow? Mo took a step toward him. What do you mean? Aren't you satisfied yet? One of your men has disappeared already. Do you want to be the next? I can live with the risk, replied Capricorn, unimpressed. His men leaped to their feet as he rose from his chair and walked slowly down the altar steps. They stood there like schoolboys, although some of them were taller than Capricorn, hands clasped behind their backs as if at any moment he might inspect their fingernails for cleanliness. Maggie couldn't help remembering what Basta had said, how young he himself had been when he had joined Capricorn, and she wondered whether it was out of fear or admiration that the men bowed their heads. Capricorn had stopped beside one of the bulging money bags. Oh, I have a great many plans for you, Silvertongue, believe me, he said, putting his hand into the sack and running the coins through his fingers. Today was just a test. After all, I had to convince myself of your talents with my own eyes and ears, right? I can certainly use all this gold, but tomorrow you're going to read something else out of a book for me. He strolled over to the boxes that had contained the books that were now burnt to ashes and reached into one. Surprise, he announced, smiling as he held up a single book. It didn't look at all like the copy Maggie and Eleanor had brought him. It still had a brightly colored paper dust jacket with a picture that Maggie couldn't make out from a distance. Oh yes, I still have one, remarked Capricorn, scanning the uncomprehending faces with pleasure. My own personal copy, you might say, and tomorrow, Silvertongue, you're going to read to me from it. As I was saying, I like this world of yours very much indeed, but there's a friend from the old days that I miss. I never let your substitute try his skill with my friend. I was afraid he might bring him here without a head, or with only one leg. But now I have you, and you're a master of your art. Mo was staring incredulously at the book in Capricorn's hand as if he expected it to dissolve into thin air at any moment. Have a rest, Silvertongue, said Capricorn. Spare your precious voice. You'll have plenty of time for that because I have to go away and I won't be back till noon tomorrow. Take these three back to their quarters, he told his men. Give them enough to eat and some blankets for the night. Oh yes, and get Mortola to bring him tea. That kind of thing works wonders on a hoarse-tired voice. Didn't you always sweeten with honey, Darius? He turned inquiringly to his old reader, who simply nodded and looked sympathetically at Mo. Back to our quarters. Do you mean that hole where your man with the knife put us last night? Eleanor's cheeks were flushed red, whether in horror or indignation, Maggie couldn't guess. This is wrongful detention. No worse, abduction. That's it, abduction. Are you aware how many years in jail you'd get for it? Abduction? Basta savored the word. Sounds good to me, really good. Capricorn gave him a smile, then he looked Eleanor up and down as if he were seeing her for the first time. Basta, he said, is this lady of any use to us? Not that I know of, replied Basta, smiling like a child who had just been given permission to smash a toy. Eleanor went pale and tried to step backward, but Cockerel barred her way and held her firmly. What do we generally do with useless things? Basta asked Capricorn quietly. Basta went on smiling. Stop that, said Mo angrily to Capricorn. Stop frightening her at once, or I'm not reading you another word. With every appearance of indifference, Capricorn turned his back to him, and Basta kept smiling. Stupid wind. It's blowing my hair in my mouth. Change places. Am I getting sun? I'm getting cooked. Fuck. Time to scoot. Shit. Okay, gotta move my Gatorade. I guess this is good. Still kind of a lot of sun. There we go. It's a little better. I'm gonna make y'all stay up again. I swear I like inhaled one of those fucking white dusty things or something. Oh, that spot over there was way more comfy. This one has a lot of stabby things. Ugh. Do I have a chapstick in here? No, that's lame. I might need to run and grab one real quick while I'm stopped anyways. Oops. Guess let's just keep reading. Well, I don't know. I'm gonna go get some chapstick. I'll be right back. Ugh. Ow. Whew. Oh, you look comfy in here.
Sorry for the delay. So we're gonna play for you and butterscotch. Because this shouldn't be about revenge. It should be about having fun. Sure, we might suck. We might be total crap, right, girls? But that's okay. We're doing it because we love it. And hey, it was just listen, I got something else to say. Back when this was just for fun, when it was just us girls, there was someone who I loved to sing with more than anyone else. That's my sister, Gail. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to all you guys. This Tata's been real cool. So, our first song is by Gail. Let's hear it for her. Gail!
Really?
I like this episode. hot. Fuzzies everywhere. Like attacking my face. It's like, why did it go so far over there? Okay. Ugh. Jesus. Y'all still with me? I should put my headphone up probably, since I'm not using it. Oh my god, I like covered it in fuzzies. Hey, Bat Witch. Welcome in. Okay. With every appearance of indifference, Capricorn turned his back to him and Basta kept smiling. Maggie saw Eleanor press a hand to her trembling lips and quickly went over to stand beside her. She's not useless. She knows more about books than anyone else in the world, she said, holding Eleanor's other hand very tight. Capricorn turned around. The look in his eyes made Maggie shudder, as if someone were running cold fingers down her spine. His eyelashes were as pale as cobwebs. Eleanor definitely knows more stories with treasure in them than that spineless reader of yours, Maggie stammered. Definitely. Eleanor squeezed Maggie's fingers hard. Her own hand was damp with sweat. Yes, absolutely, that's true, she said huskily. I'm sure I can think of several more. Well, well, was all Capricorn said, his curved lips tracing a smile. We'll see. Then he gave his men a signal, and they made Eleanor, Maggie, and Mo file past the tables, past Capricorn's statue and the red columns, and out through the heavy door that groaned as they pushed it open. Outside, beyond the shadow of the church on the village square, the sun shone down from a cloudless blue sky, and the air was filled with scents of summer. It was as if nothing unusual had happened. Gloomy Prospects, Chapter 19. This excerpt, foreshadowing, is from the Jungle Book. It said, the python dropped his head lightly for a moment on Mowgli's shoulders. Aw, Mowgli. Mowgli was one of my first crushes ever on TV. A brave heart and a courteous tongue, they shall carry thee far through the jungle, manling. But now go hence quickly with thy friends. Go and sleep, for the moon sets, and what follows it is not well that thou shouldst see. They did indeed get enough to eat. Around noon, a woman brought them bread and olives, and toward evening there was a pasta smelling of fresh rosemary. But the food couldn't cut short the endless hours, and any more than full stomachs dispelled their fear of what the next day might bring. Perhaps not even a book would have done it, but there was no point thinking of that since they had no books. Only the blank walls and the locked door. At least a new light bulb was hanging from the ceiling, so they didn't have to sit in the dark the whole time. Maggie kept looking at the crack under the door to see if night was falling yet. She imagined lizards sitting outside in the sun. She'd seen some in the square outside the church. Had the emerald green lizard that scurried out of the heaps of coins found its way outside? And what happened to the boy? Maggie saw his frightened expression whenever she closed her eyes. She wondered whether the same thoughts were going through Mo's head. He had hardly said a word since they were locked up again, but had flopped down on a pile of straw and turned his face to the wall. Eleanor was no more talkative. How generous was all she muttered when Cockerel had bolted the door after them. Our host has graciously provided 2 more heaps of moldy straw. Then she had sat down in a corner, legs outstretched, and began staring gloomily at her knees, then at the grubby wall. Mo, asked Maggie at last, when she could no longer stand the silence, What do you think they're doing to the boy? And what kind of friend are you supposed to read out of the book for Capricorn? I don't know, Maggie, was all he replied without turning around. So she left him alone, made herself a bed of straw beside his, then paced up and down between the bare walls. Perhaps the strange boy was on the other side of one of them. She put her ear to the wall. Not a sound came through. Someone scratched a name in the plaster. Ricardo Bentone. Bentoni? I don't know. 19/5/96. Maggie ran her finger through the letters. A little further down, there was another name and then another. Maggie wondered what had become of them. Ricardo, Hugo, and Bernardo. Perhaps I ought to scratch my name here too, she thought, just in case. Oh my god, guys, there's too much allergies outside. Like, fuck. But she was careful not to think her way to the end of that sentence. Behind her, Eleanor lay down on her straw bed, sighing. When Maggie turned to her, she forced a smile. What I wouldn't give for a comb, she said, pushing the hair back from her forehead. I'd never have thought that in any situation like this I'd miss a comb so much of all things, but I do. Heavens, I don't even have a hairpin left. I must look a fright. Like a witch or a mop that's seen better days. Same, Eleanor, same. No, really, you look fine. Your hairpins were always falling out anyway, said Maggie. Actually, I think you look younger. Younger? Well, if you say so. Eleanor glanced down at herself. Her mouse gray sweater was filthy, and there were 3 runs in her stockings. Maggie, that was very kind of you to help me back there in the church, she said, pulling her skirt down over her knees. My knees were like jelly. I was so scared. I don't know what's come over me. I feel like someone else, as if the old Eleanor has driven home and left me here by myself. Her lips began to tremble, and Maggie thought she was going to cry, but the next moment, the familiar Eleanor was back again. Well, there we are, she said. It's only in an emergency that you find out what you're truly made of. Personally, I always thought if I were a wooden statue, I'd be carved out of oak, but it seems I'm more like pearwood or something else very soft. It only takes a villain like that to play with his knife in front of my nose, and wood shavings start flaking away. And now the tears did come. Hard as Eleanor tried to keep them back, angrily she rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand. I think you're doing splendidly, Eleanor. Mo was still lying with his face to the wall. You're both doing splendidly, and I could wring my own neck for dragging you into all this. Nonsense. If anyone around here needs his neck wrung, it's Capricorn, said Eleanor, and that man Basta. My God, I'd have never thought of the idea of strangling another human being would give me such enormous satisfaction. But I'm sure if I could just get my hand around that Basta's neck, On seeing the shock in Maggie's eyes, she fell guiltily silent, but Maggie just shrugged her shoulders. I feel the same, she murmured, and began scratching an M on the wall with the key of her bicycle lock. Weird to think she still had the key in her pants pocket, like a souvenir of another life. Eleanor ran her fingers down one of the runs in her stockings, and Mo turned his back and stared up at the ceiling. I'm so sorry, Maggie, he said suddenly. I'm so sorry I let them take the book away from me. Maggie scratched an E into the wall. It doesn't make any difference, she said, stepping back. The G's in her name looked like nibbled O's. You probably couldn't have read her back out of it again anyway. No, probably not, murmured Mo, and went on staring at the ceiling. It's not your fault, said Maggie. She wanted to add, the main thing is that you're with me. The main thing is for Basta never to put his knife to your throat again. I mean, I hardly remember my mother. I only knew her for a couple of hours. I only know her from a couple of photographs, but Maggie said none of that, for she knew it wouldn't comfort Mo. It would probably just make him sadder than ever. For the first time, Maggie had some idea of how much he missed her mother, and for one crazy moment, she felt jealous. She scratched an I on the plaster. That was an easy letter, then she lowered the key. Footsteps were approaching outside. Eleanor put her hand to her mouth when they stopped. Basta pushed open the door, and there was someone behind him. Maggie recognized the old woman she had seen in Capricorn's house. With a dour expression on her face, she pushed past Basta and put a mug and a thermos jug on the floor. As if I didn't have enough to do, she muttered before going out again. So now we have to feed our fine guests, too. They might at least be put to work if you have to keep them here. Tell that to Capricorn, was all Basta replied. Then he drew his knife, smiled at Eleanor, and wiped the blade on his jacket. It was getting dark outside, and his snow-white shirt shone through the gathering twilight. Don't forget to drink. I was just about to do that. I'm like about to be out of my Gatorade. What in the fuck does that mean? Mac? Enjoy your tea, Silvertongue, he said, relishing the discomfort on Eleanor's face. Mortola's put so much honey in the jug, your mouth will probably gum up with the first sip you take, but your throat will be as good as new tomorrow. What have you done with the boy? Asked Mo. Oh, I think he's next door to you. Capricorn hasn't decided what's to become of him yet. Cockerel will try him out with a little ordeal by fire tomorrow, and then we'll know if he's any use to us. Mo sat up. Ordeal by fire, he asked, his voice both bitter and mocking. Well, you can't have passed that one yourself. You're even afraid of Dustfinger's matches. Watch your tongue, Basta hissed at him. One more word and I'll cut it out, however precious it may be. Oh, no, you won't, said Mo, standing up. He took his time filling the mug with steaming tea. Maybe not. Basta lowered his voice as if afraid of being overheard. But your little daughter has a tongue, too, and hers isn't as valuable as yours. Mo flung the mug of hot tea at him, and Basta closed the door so quickly the mug smashed into the wood. Sweet dreams, he called from outside as he shot the bolts. See you in the morning. What in the hell? None of them said a word when he was gone, and not for a long, long time. Mo, tell me a story, Mo whispered at last. Wait, what? Meggie? Did I say Meggie? It says... Mo, tell me a story, Meggie whispered at last. What story do you want to hear? He asked, putting his arm around her shoulders. Tell me the one of us being in Egypt, she whispered, and we're looking for a treasure and surviving sandstorms and scorpions and all the scary ghosts rising from their tombs to watch over their precious grave goods. Oh, that story, said Mo. Didn't I make it up for your 8th birthday? It's rather a gloomy tale as far as I remember. Yes, very, said Meggie, but it has a happy ending. Everything turns out all right, and we come home laden with treasure. I wouldn't mind hearing that one myself, said Eleanor, her voice unsteady. She was probably still thinking of Basta's knife. So Mo began to tell his story, without the rustle of pages, without the endless labyrinth of letters. Mo, nothing ever came out of a story you were just telling, did it? Asked Meggie at one point, suddenly feeling anxious. No, he said. For that to happen, it seems that the printer's ink is necessary, and someone else needs to have made up the story. Then he continued, and Meggie and Eleanor listened until his voice had carried them far, far away. Finally, they all went to sleep. What the fuck? Y'all are tripping. What's up, Mario? What the fuck? A sound woke them all up. Someone was fiddling with the lock of the door. Meggie thought she heard a muffled curse. Oh no, breathed Eleanor. She was the first on her feet. They're coming to take me away. That's a song. The old woman's persuaded them. Why feed us? You, maybe, she said, looking frantically at Mo, but why me? Go over to the wall, Eleanor, said Mo as he moved Meggie behind him. Both of you keep well back from the door. The lock sprang open with a muffled little click, and the door was pushed just far enough open for someone to squeeze through it. Dustfinger. He cast a last anxious glance outside, then pulled the door shut behind him and leaned against it. So I heard you've done it again, Silvertongue, he said, lowering his voice. They say the poor boy still hasn't uttered a sound. I don't blame him. I can tell you it's a horrible feeling suddenly landing in someone else's story. Hey, there's sun on me. Rude. Y'all still here? I don't know how to sit anymore. I don't know how to be comfortable. Okay. What are you doing here? Snapped Eleanor, but the sight of Dustfinger had actually filled her with relief. Leave him alone, Eleanor, said Mo, moving her aside and going over to Dustfinger. How are your hands? He asked. Dustfinger shrugged. They put cold water on them in the kitchen, but the skin's still almost as red as the flames that licked it. Ask him what he wants, hissed Eleanor, and if he's just come to tell us he can't do anything about the mess we're in, then you might as well wring his lying neck. By way of answer, Dustfinger tossed her a bunch of keys. Why do you think I'm here? He grumbled back, switching off the light. Stealing the car keys from Basta wasn't easy, and a word of thanks might not be out of place, but we can talk about that later. We don't want to hang around any longer. Let's get out of here. Cautiously, he opened the door and listened. There's a sentry posted up in the church tower, he whispered, but the guards are keeping watch on the hills, not the village. The dogs are in their cave to deal with them. Luckily, they like me better than Basta. Why should we suddenly trust him? Whispered Eleanor to Mo. Suppose there's some other devilry behind this. I want you to take me with you. That's my only motive, snapped Dustfinger. There's nothing here for me anymore. Capricorn's let me down. He sent only a scrap of hope I still had up in smoke. He thinks he can do what he likes with me. Dustfinger's only a dog you can kick without fearing may bite back, but he's wrong there. He burned the book, so I'm taking away the reader I brought him. And as for you, he said, jabbing his burnt finger into Eleanor's chest, you can come because you have a car. No one gets out of this village on foot, not even Capricorn's men. Not with the snakes that infest these hills. But I can't drive, and so... I knew it. Eleanor almost forgot to keep her voice down. He just wants to save his own skin. That's why he's helping us. He doesn't have a guilty conscience. Oh no, why should he? I don't care why he's helping us, Eleanor. Mo interrupted her impatiently. We have to get away from here. That's what matters. We're going to take someone else with us too. Someone else? Who? Dustfinger looked at him uneasily. The boy, the one I condemned yesterday to the same fate as you, replied Mo, making his way past Dustfinger out of the door. Basta said he's next door to us, and a lock is no obstacle to your clever fingers. I burned those clever fingers today, muttered Dustfinger angrily. Still, just as you please, your soft heart will be the ruin of us yet. When Dustfinger knocked on the door, bearing the number of 5, a faint rustling could be heard on the other side of it. Seems like they were going to let him live, he whispered as he got to work on the lock. They put people condemned to death in the crypt under the church. Ever since I told Basta for a joke that the white lady... What in... Ah! Oh, it's a grasshopper. Fucker. I guess I should move again. Fuck. Like, how often do I gotta keep relocating? It looks like I could move that way. Like, kind of more towards the water. I don't know where the most shade is right now, really. Okay, but we're gonna have to move though, for sure. What's up? Monique. Okay, let me look for a sec. Where are we going? Okay. My stuff's just kind of weird and backwards. Like, we're gonna be... Oh my god, is that a hole? Like, sat down, it's really squishy. I don't know which way to have y'all anymore now. I think over here you can maybe see the river. not. Fuck off. Oh my god, is there mosquitoes? Don't they know I've got poison on me? Okay. Is this good? A little refresher. What is trying to come up? Behind the tree? What the fuck? It's killing the environment. The environment's trying to fucking kill me. Chill. There we go. I guess. Shit, I can't seem to get y'all in a good spot. Is it dark or is it just me? It looks really dark, right? Oh. Okay. Oh fuck, I closed my fucking chat. Damn, I gotta turn this way or there's wind blowing my hair in my face. Okay, this is like the best I can do. I don't know what to tell you guys. Okay. Ever since I told Basta for a joke that the white lady haunts the stone coffins down there, he turns white as a sheet whenever Capricorn sends him into the crypt. He chuckled quietly at the memory, like a schoolboy who has just played a particularly good practical joke. Maggie looked across at the church. Do they often condemn people to death? She asked quietly. Dustfinger shrugged. Not as often as they used to, but it does happen. Stop telling her such stories, whispered Mo, and he and Eleanor never took their eyes off the church tower. The sentry was posted high up on the wall beside the belfry? Dunno. It made Maggie dizzy just to look up there. Those are no stories, Silvertongue. It's the truth. Don't you recognize the truth whenever you meet it anymore? The truth's not pretty, of course. No one likes to look it in the face. Dustfinger stepped back from the door and bowed. After you, I've picked the lock. You can bring him out. Even with his burnt fingers, it hadn't taken him long. You go in, Mo whispered to Maggie. He'll be less afraid of you. It was pitch dark on the other side of the door, but Maggie heard a rustle as she stepped into the room, as if an animal were moving somewhere on the flashlight. When Maggie switched it on, the beam of light fell on the boy's dark face. The straw they had given him seemed even moldier than the pile in which Maggie had slept. But the boy looked as if he hadn't closed his eyes since Flatnose. And anyway, I have fucking hiccups again. Jesus Christ. was I? Oh. His arms were tightly clasped around his legs as if they were all he could rely on. Maggie... Oh. Perhaps he was still waiting for his nightmare to end. "Come with us," whispered Maggie, reaching a hand out to him. "We want to help you. We'll take you away from here." And he didn't move. He just stared at her, his eyes narrow with distrust. "Hurry up, Maggie," breathed Mo through the door. The boy glanced at him and retreated until his back was right up against the wall. "Please," whispered Maggie, "you must come. The people here will do bad things to you." He was still looking at her. Then he stood up cautiously, never taking his eyes off her. He was taller than she was by almost a hand's breadth. Suddenly, he leaped forward, making for the open door. He pushed Maggie aside so roughly that she fell over, but he couldn't get past Mo. "Here, take it easy," Mo said under his breath. "We really do want to help you, but you must do as we say, understand?" The boy glared at him with dislike. "You're all devils," he whispered. "Devils or demons." So he did understand their language, and why not? His own story was told in every language in the world. Fuck off. Maggie got up and rubbed her knee. She must have grazed it on the stone floor. "If you want to see some real devils, then all you have to do is stay here," she hissed at the boy as she pushed her way past him. He flinched away as if she were a witch. Mo drew the boy to his side. "See that man up on watch there?" he whispered, pointing to the church tower. "If he sees us, they'll kill us." The boy looked up at the man on guard. Dustfinger went over to him. "Hurry up, will you?" he said quietly. "If the lad doesn't want to go with us, then he can just stay here, and the rest of you take your shoes off," he added, glancing at the boy's bare feet, "or you'll make more noise than a flock of goats." Eleanor grumbled something in a cross voice, but she obeyed, and the boy did follow them, if hesitantly. Dustfinger hurried on ahead, as if trying to outstrip his own shadow. The alley down which he led them sloped so steeply that Maggie kept stumbling, and every time Eleanor stubbed her toes on the bumpy cobblestones, she uttered a quiet curse. It was dark between the close-set houses. Masonry arches stretched from one side of the street to the other, as if to prevent the walls from collapsing. The rusty streetlights cast ghostly shadows. Every noise sounded threatening. Every cat scurrying out of a doorway made Maggie jump, but Capricorn's village was asleep. They passed only one guard leaning on the wall in a side street and smoking. Two tomcats were fighting somewhere on the rooftops, and the guard bent to pick up a stone to throw at them. Dustfinger took advantage of the moment. Maggie was very glad he had made them take off their shoes. They slipped soundlessly past the guard, whose back was still turned, but Maggie dared not breathe again until they turned around the next corner. Once again, she noticed the many empty houses, the blank windows, the dilapidated doors. What had wrecked these homes? Just the course of time? Had the people who once lived here run away from Capricorn, or was the village already abandoned before he and his men took up residence? Hadn't Dustfinger said something like that? He had stopped. He raised his hand in a warning gesture and put a finger to his lips. They had reached the outskirts of the village. Only the parking lot still lay ahead. 2 streetlights illuminated the surface of the cracked asphalt, and a tall wire netting fence rose to their left. "The arena for Capricorn ceremonies and festivities is on the other side of that fence," whispered Dustfinger. "I suppose the village children once played football there, but these days it's just the scene of Capricorn's diabolical celebrations. Bonfires, brandy, a few shots fired into the air, fireworks, blackened faces, that's their idea of fun." They put on their shoes before following Dustfinger into the parking lot. Maggie kept looking at the wire fence. Diabolical celebrations. She could almost see the bonfires, the blackened faces. "Come on, Maggie," urged Mo, leading her on. The sound of rushing water could be heard somewhere in the darkness, and Maggie remembered the bridge they had crossed on the way here. Suppose a guard was stationed there this time. There were several cars in the lot, including Eleanor's, which was parked a little way from the others. They all kept looking around anxiously as they ran toward it. Behind them, the church tower rose high above the rooftops, and there was nothing now to shield from the sentry's eyes. Maggie couldn't see him at this distance, but she was sure he was still there. From such a height, they must look like black beetles crawling over a table. Did he have a pair of binoculars? "Come on, Eleanor," whispered Mo. It seemed to be taking her forever to unlock the car door. All right, she called back. I just don't have such nimble hands as our light-fingered friend. Mo put his arm around Maggie's shoulders as he looked around, but apart from a few stray cats, he could see nothing moving in the parking lot or amongst the houses. Reassured, he made Maggie get into the back seat. The boy hesitated for a moment, examining the car as if it were some strange animal, and he couldn't be sure whether it was kindly disposed or would swallow him alive. But finally he got in too. Maggie scowled at him and moved as far away from him as possible. Her knee still hurt. "Where's the matchstick eater?" whispered Eleanor. "Damn it, don't tell me the man's disappeared again." Maggie was the first to spot him. He was stealing over the other cars. Eleanor clutched the steering wheel as if resisting only with difficulty the temptation to drive off without him. "What's he up to this time?" she hissed. None of them knew the answer. Dustfinger was gone for an excruciatingly long time, and when he came back, he was closing a switchblade. "What was the idea of that?" Eleanor snapped when he squeezed into the back seat next to the boy. "Didn't you say we must hurry? And what were you doing with that knife? Not cutting someone open, I hope." "Is my name Basta?" inquired Dustfinger, annoyed, as he forced his legs in behind the driver's seat. "I was slitting their tires, that's all, just to be on the safe side." He was still holding the knife. Maggie looked at it uneasily. "That's Basta's knife," she said. Dustfinger smiled as he put it in his pants pocket. "Not anymore. I'd like to have stolen his silly amulet too, but he wears it around his neck even at night, and that would have been too dangerous." Somewhere a dog began to bark. Mo wound down his window and put his head out, looking concerned. "Or not, it's only toads making all that racket," said Eleanor. But what Maggie suddenly heard echoing through the night was nothing like the croaking of toads. And when she looked in alarm through the back window, a man was climbing out of one of the parked vehicles, a dusty, dirty white delivery van. It was one of Capricorn's men. Maggie had seen him in the church. He looked around him with a face still dazed by sleep. Before Maggie could stop her, Eleanor started the engine, and the man snatched a shotgun from his backpack and stumbled toward the car. For a moment, Maggie almost felt sorry for him. He looked so sleepy and baffled. What would Capricorn do to a guard who fell asleep on duty? But then he aimed the gun and fired it. Maggie ducked her head well below the back of the seat, and Eleanor pressed her foot down hard on the accelerator. "Damn it all," she shouted at Dustfinger. "Didn't you see that man when you were slinking around between the cars?" "No, I didn't," Dustfinger shouted back. "Now drive." "Not that way. It's over there. We must get to the road." Eleanor wrenched the steering wheel around. The boy was huddled down beside Maggie, and every shot he had closed his eyes tight and put his hand over his ears. Were there any guns in his story? Probably not. No more than there were cars. His and Maggie's heads knocked together as Eleanor's car bumped over the stony track. When it finally reached the road, things weren't much better. "Isn't the road we came along?" cried Eleanor. Capricorn's village loomed over them like a fortress. The houses simply refused to get any smaller. "Oh, yes, it is, but Basta met us farther down when we arrived." Dustfinger was clinging to the seat with one hand and to his backpack with the other. A furious chattering came from the bag, and the boy cast it a terrified glance. Maggie thought she recognized the place where Basta had met them when they drove past it. It was the hill from which he had seen the village for the first time. Then the houses suddenly disappeared, engulfed by the night, as if Capricorn's village had never existed. There was no guard posted on the bridge, nor at the rusty barrier across the road cutting off the way to the village. Maggie looked back at it until the darkness had swallowed it up. It's over, she thought. It really is all over. The night was clear. Maggie had never seen so many stars. The sky stretched above the black hills like a cloth embroidered with tiny beads. The whole world seemed to consist of hills, like a cat arching its back at the face of the night. No human beings, no houses, no fear. Mo turned around and stroked the hair back from Maggie's forehead. "Everything all right?" he asked. She nodded and closed her eyes. Suddenly, all Maggie wanted to do was sleep, if only the pounding of her heart would let her. "It's a dream," murmured a toneless voice beside her. "Only a dream. It just cannot be." Maggie turned to the boy who wasn't looking at her. "It has to be a dream," he repeated, nodding vigorously as if to encourage himself. "Everything looks wrong, false, weird. Like in dreams, and now," he murmured, turning his head to indicate the surroundings outside. "Now we're flying, or the night is flying past us, or something." Maggie could almost have smiled. She wanted to tell him that it wasn't a dream, but she was just too tired to explain the whole complicated story. She looked at Dustfinger. He was patting the fabric of his pack, probably trying to soothe his angry Martin. "Don't look at me like that," he said when he saw Maggie watching him. "You can't expect me to explain. Your father will have to do that. After all, the poor lad's nightmare is his fault." Mo's guilty conscience showed clearly on his face when he turned to the boy. "What's your name?" he asked. It wasn't in the... But there he broke off. The boy looked at him suspiciously, then bowed his head. "Farid," he said dully. "My name is Farid, but I believe it's unlucky to speak in a dream. You never find your way back if you do." He shut his mouth tightly and stared straight ahead, as if to avoid looking at anyone, and said no more. Did he have a mother and father in his story? Maggie couldn't remember. It had just mentioned a boy without a name who served a band of thieves. "It's a dream," he whispered again. "Only a dream. The sun will rise and it will all disappear. That's what it'll do." Mo looked at him, unhappy and at a loss, like someone who has handled a young bird, knowing it can never return to the nest. Poor Mo, thought Maggie, poor Farid, but she was thankful too, and she was ashamed of herself for it. Ever since the lizard crawled out of the golden coins in Capricorn's church, she couldn't help thinking about it. "I wish I could do that," her thoughts had kept saying to her very quietly. The wish had settled like a cuckoo in the nest of her heart, where it kept fluffing up its plumage and making itself at home, no matter how hard she tried to throw it out. "I wish I could do that," it whispered. "I'd like to bring them out of books, touch them, all those characters, all those wonderful characters. I want them to come out of the pages and sit beside me. I want them to smile at me. I want. Outside, it was still as dark as if morning would never come. "I'm going to drive straight on," said Eleanor, "until we reach my house." Far behind them, headlights showed like fingers probing the night. Damn, guys. I wonder how long we've been reading. It's 3:30 right now. We can keep going. No hiccups. How long is this next chapter? Another 10 pages. I feel like we can keep reading. It's only 3:30. Ragged World, welcome in. I think I am gonna run inside though real quick and pee. And then I'll be back to read some more. It's so dark, like, I don't know. My leg was kind of going to sleep too. I kind of need to walk for a second. I'll just leave the mic out here. Y'all can listen to the sounds of nature. I'll be right back. remember where I was sitting. This way is where the wind's coming. Okay. Comfy? I don't know. Am I comfy? Are y'all comfortable? Big ass water bottle. Okay. We're in chapter 20 now, y'all. Page 204. This excerpt is from, well, we already had one from them before, but it's another one from them. The Borables Go for Broke. Another one. None of that matters now, said Twilight. Look behind you. The Borables did, and just a little beyond the rim of the bridge, they saw a halo of harsh whiteness reflected on the underneath of the dark sky. Move. That's how I want to sit. What's up, Wilma? Okay. It's like kind of downhill, I feel like, though. It's just kind of weird. Just a little beyond the rim of the bridge, they saw a halo of harsh whiteness reflected on the underneath of the dark sky. It was the beam of a car's headlights as it got into position on the north side of the bridge, the side the runaways had left only moments before. Okay, that's it. That's all of the excerpt. The fucking wind is moving. Change in direction. It was coming in totally this way, now it's like this way. Okay. Behind them, the headlights were getting closer, no matter how fast Eleanor drove. It could be just any old car, said Meggie, but she knew that was unlikely. There was only one village on that bumpy, potholed road that they had been following for almost an hour, and that was Capricorn's. Their pursuers could only have come from there. Now what? Asked Eleanor. She was in such a state that the car was weaving all over the road. I'm not letting them lock me up in that hole again. No, no, no. At each no, she struck the steering wheel with the palm of her hand. Didn't you say you'd slit their tires? She snapped at Dustfinger. Yeah, and so I did, he replied angrily. Obviously, they thought of that kind of thing. Ever heard of spare tires? Go on, step on it. There ought to be a village quite soon. It can't be far away now, if we can make it that far. Yes, if is the question, said Eleanor, tapping the fuel gauge. I've got enough gas for about another 10 kilometers, 20 at the most. But they never even got that far. As they swerved around a sharp bend, one of the front tires blew out. Eleanor only just managed to wrench the steering wheel around before the car skidded off the road. Meggie screamed, burying her face in her hands. For a terrible moment, she thought they were going to plunge down the steep slope to their left, the bottom of which disappeared into the darkness. But the car skidded to the right, scraped its fender against the low stone wall on the other side of the road, gave a last gasp, and came to a halt under the low of branches of a chestnut oak that leaned over the road. Oh, hell, bloody hell, swore Eleanor, undoing her seatbelt. Everyone all right? Now I know why I've never trusted cars, muttering Dustfinger, opening his door. Meggie sat there trembling all over. Mo pulled her out of the car and looked anxiously at her face. Are you all right? Meggie nodded, climbed out on Dustfinger's side. Did he still think he was dreaming? Did I say Farid? Farid climbed out on Dustfinger's side. Did he still think he was dreaming? Dustfinger stood in the road, backpack over his shoulder, listening. The unmistakable sound of an engine came piercing through the night from far away. The wind is just all over the place. It's not making its mind up. We must get the car off the road, he said. What? Eleanor looked at him in horror. We'll have to push it down the slope. My car! Eleanor was almost screaming. He's right, Eleanor, said Mo. Perhaps we can shake them off that way. We'll push the car down the slope, but they may not notice it in the dark, and even if they do, they'll think we went off the road. Then we can climb up the hill on the other side and hide among the trees. Eleanor cast a doubtful glance on at the hill on her right. But it's much too steep, and what about the snakes? I'm sure Basta has a new knife by now, Dustfinger reminded her. Eleanor gave him her darkest look and without another word went around to the back of her car to check inside the trunk. Where's our luggage? She asked. Dustfinger looked at her with amusement. I expect Basta divided it out among Capricorn's maids. Ingratiate himself with them. Eleanor looked at him as if she didn't believe a word of it, but then quickly closed the trunk, braced her arms against the car, and began to push. They couldn't do it. Hard as they pushed and shoved, Eleanor's car only rolled off the road, but it would not slide more than a few meters down the slope. Then it stopped with its hood stuck underneath the growth and refused to go any further. Meanwhile, the sound of an engine, so curiously out of place in this desolate wilderness, was getting alarmingly loud. Dustfinger gave the obstinate car a final kick, and they all clambered back up the road, sweating. After climbing over an ancient wall on the other side, they struggled up the slope, anything to get away from the road itself. Mo hauled Meggie along behind him whenever she got stuck, and Dustfinger helped Farid. Eleanor had her work cut out getting herself up the hillside, which was crisscrossed with low walls that had been built in a laborious attempt to wrest narrow fields and orchards from the poor soil, somewhere to grow a few olive trees and grapevines, anything that would bear fruit here, but the trees had run wild, and the ground was covered with fruit that was no longer harvested, for the people who once lived here had long since left to find an easier life elsewhere. Keep your heads down, gasped Dustfinger, ducking behind one of the ruined walls. They're coming. Mo pulled Meggie down under the nearest tree. The tangled thorn bushes growing among its gnarled roots were just tall enough to hide them. What about the snakes? Eleanor whispered as she stumbled after them. Too cold for snakes at the moment, whispered Dustfinger from his hiding place. Haven't you learned anything from all those clever books of yours? Eleanor was about to snap back an answer, but Mo had quickly put a hand over her mouth to keep her quiet. The vehicle appeared on the road below them. It was the white delivery van in which the guard had been sleeping. Without slowing down, it drove past the place where they had pushed Eleanor's car over the slope and disappeared around the next bend. Relieved, Meggie was about to raise her head above the thorn bushes when Mo pushed her down again. Not yet, he muttered, straining his ears. The night was perfectly still. Meggie had never known one like it. It was as if she could hear the trees breathing, the trees, the grass, and the night itself. They watched the van headlights emerge on the slope of the next hill, 2 fingers of light groping their way along the invisible road in the dark. But suddenly they stopped moving. They're turning, whispered Eleanor. Oh God, now what? She tried to stand up, but Mo held her back. Are you mad? He hissed. It's too late to climb any further. They'd see us. Mo was right. The delivery van was speeding back up the road. Meggie saw it stop just a few meters from where they had pushed Eleanor's car. Heard the van doors open and saw 2 men get out. Both had their backs to the fugitives, but one of them turned and looked suspiciously up the slope. Meggie thought she recognized Basta's face, though it was a little more than a patch of paler color in the night. There's the car, said the other man. Was that Flatnose? He was certainly tall and broad enough. See if they're in it. Yes, that was Basta. Meggie would have known his voice among 1,000 others. Flatnose made his way down the slope, clumsy as a bear. Meggie heard him cursing the thorns, the prickles, the darkness, and the wretched riffraff he was having to stumble after in the middle of the night. Basta was still standing in the road, his face sharply outlined when he lit a cigarette with a lighter. The white smoke drifted up to them until Meggie thought she could almost smell it. They're not here, called Flatnose. They must have gotten away on foot. Hell, do you think we have to follow them? Basta went over to the roadside and looked down. Then he turned and looked up at the slope where Meggie was crouching beside Mo, her heart thudding wildly. They can't have gotten far, he said, but it'll be difficult to find their trail in the dark. Exactly, Flatnose was panting as he appeared back on the road. We're not bloody native trackers, are we? Basta did not reply. He just stood there, listening and inhaling his cigarette smoke. Then he whispered something to Flatnose. Maggie's heart almost stopped. Flatnose looked around anxiously. "Nah, let's get the dogs instead," Maggie heard him say. "Even if they're hiding somewhere around here, how do we know whether they climbed up or down?" Basta glanced out and trot out his cigarette. Then he went back to the van and took out 2 shotguns. "We'll try going down first," he said, tossing Flatnose one of the guns. "I'm sure that fat woman would rather climb downhill." And without another word, he vanished into the darkness. Flatnose cast the van a longing glance, then trudged after him, grumbling. The 2 were barely out of sight before Dustfinger rose to his feet, soundlessly as a shadow, and pointed up the slope. Maggie's heart was beating in her throat as they followed him. They darted from tree to tree, from bush to bush, constantly looking behind them. Every time a twig cracked underfoot, Maggie jumped, but luckily Basta and Flatnose were making a fair amount of noise themselves as they worked their way downhill through the undergrowth. A time came when they couldn't see the road anymore, but their fear did not leave them. The fear that Basta might have turned back already and was now following them uphill. Yet however often they stopped and listened, all they could hear was their own breathing. "They'll soon realize they've gone the wrong way," Dustfinger whispered after a while. "They'll go back for the dogs. We're lucky they didn't bring them in the first place. Basta doesn't think much of those dogs, and he's right. I've fed them cheese often enough, and cheese dulls a dog's nose. All the same, he'll fetch them sooner or later, because even Basta doesn't like taking bad news back to Capricorn." "Then we must just go faster," said Mo. "Go faster where?" Eleanor was still fighting for breath. Dustfinger looked around. Maggie wondered why. She could hardly make out anything, it was so dark. "We must keep going south," said Dustfinger, "toward the coast. We must hide among other people. That's the only thing that can save us. Down there, the nights are bright and nobody believes in the devil." Baird was standing beside Maggie, gazing at the night sky as if he could make morning come or find the people Dustfinger had mentioned somewhere. But there wasn't a light to be seen in the darkness except for the tingle of stars sparkling cold in the distant in the heavens. For a moment, Maggie felt as if those stars were giving away their presence and imagined she could hear them whispering, "Look, Basta, there they are. Go down there. Quick, catch them." They stumbled on, keeping close together so that no one would get lost. Dustfinger had taken Gwyn out of his pack and put him on his chain before letting him run alongside them. The marten didn't seem to like it. Dustfinger had to keep hauling him out of the undergrowth, away from all the promising scents that their human noses couldn't pick up. The marten spat and snarled with annoyance, biting and tearing at the chain. Ugh. Did we get lunch? I kind of skipped breakfast, so lunch was my fruit bowl and my yogurt and pretzels. After I'm done reading, though, we're gonna go cook, and that'll be my dinner, I guess. Celine Dion song. Oh my god. That's terrible. Is it because of memes? Wilma? I'm sure. I haven't seen that many. I just know that there's a lot out there. Oops. Oh my god, my leg's asleep. It's tingling. The marten spat and snarled with annoyance, biting and tearing at the chain. "Curse the little brew, I'm sure to fall over it," said Eleanor crossly. "Can't you keep it away from under my sore feet? I tell you one thing, the moment we're in decent human company again, I'm going to take the best hotel room money can buy and put my poor feet up on a big soft cushion." "You've still got money on you?" Most sounded incredulous. "They took all mine first thing." "Oh yes, Basta took my wallet too," said Eleanor, "but I think ahead. I have my credit card somewhere safe." "Is anywhere safe from Basta?" Dustfinger dragged Gwyn away from a tree trunk. "Oh yes," replied Eleanor. "Men are never particularly keen to search fat old ladies, which can be useful. That was how some of my most valuable books came into my..." She interrupted herself abruptly, clearing her throat when her eyes fell on Maggie, but Maggie acted as if she hadn't heard Eleanor's last remark, or at least hadn't understood what she meant. Gross. Eleanor be stealing stuff, shoving it under her boob, or what? Like, where's she putting it? Gross. Is this, like, falling down or what? Like, I'm just sitting on too much of it. Oh, fuck. You're not all that fat, Maggie said. And old is a bit of an exaggeration. Oh, how her own feet hurt. Well, thank you very much, darling, said Eleanor. I think I'll buy you from your father so you can say nice things like that to me 3 times a day. How much do you want for her, Mo? I'll have to think about it, replied Mo. Suppose I let her for a few days now and then. They chatted like this, voices scarcely raised above a whisper as they struggled through the thorny growth on the hillside. It didn't matter what they talked about, for their hushed conversation had only one purpose, to fend off the fear and exhaustion that was weighing down all their limbs. On and on they walked, hoping that Dustfinger knew where he was taking them. Maggie kept close behind Mo all the time. At least his back offered some protection from the thorny branches that kept catching at her clothes and scratching her face, like vicious animals with needle-sharp claws lying in wait in the dark. At last they came upon a footpath that they could follow. It was littered with empty cartridge cases dropped by hunters who had dealt out death in his silent place. Walking was easier on the trodden earth, although Maggie was so tired she could hardly pick up her feet. When she stumbled against the back of Mo's legs for the second time, he put her on his back and carried her as he used to do before she could keep up with his long legs. He had called her Little Flea in those days, or Feather Girl, or Tinkerbell, after the fairy in Peter Pan. Sometimes he still called her Tinkerbell. Warily, Maggie rested her face against his shoulders and tried to think of Peter Pan instead of snakes or men with knives, but this time her own story was too strong to give way to an invented one. Mo was right. Fear devours everything. It was a long time since Ferret had said anything. Most of the time he stumbled along after Dustfinger. He seemed to have taken a fancy to Gwen. Whenever the Martin's chain got caught up somewhere, Ferret would rush to free him, even if Gwen only hissed at him in return and snapped at his fingers. Once he sank his teeth into the boy's thumb and made it bleed. Well, do you still think this is a dream? Asked Dustfinger, ironically, as Ferret wiped the blood away. The boy didn't answer, just examined his sore thumb, then he sucked it and spat. What else could it be? He asked. Dustfinger looked at Mo, but he seemed so deep in thought that he didn't notice the glance. How about another story? Said Dustfinger. Ferret laughed. Another story. I like that idea. I've always been fond of stories. Oh yes, and how do you like this one? Too many thorns, and I wish it would get light, but at least I haven't had to work yet. That's something. Maggie couldn't help smiling. A bird called in the distance. Gwen stopped and raised his brown muzzle, sniffing in the air. The night belongs to the beasts of prey, and always has. It's easy to forget that when you're indoors, protected by light and solid walls. Night provides cover for hunters, making it easy for them to creep up and strike their prey blind. Words about the night from one of her favorite books slipped into Maggie's mind. This is the hour of pride and power, talon and claw. She snuggled her face against Mo's shoulder once more. Perhaps I should walk again, she thought. He's been carrying me for so long, but then she nodded off to sleep, still perched on his back. Oh, my neighbors are